Hello friend, and welcome to today's video where we are going to talk about 5 tips for how to read Wuthering Heights, whether this is your first time or a reread. I really think that these tips will help you to have a more enriched experience of reading this amazing book. It may not be a surprise to you that this is one of my favorite books of all times. If you saw my video that I made a while ago about writing like Emily Bronte, or if you follow me on Instagram and see my many posts about Emily Bronte, about this book, about the Bronte's siblings. First, I'll just show you my 2 copies of Wuthering Heights. This is a beautiful edition that I just use for looking at and making cool videos. And then this one is my loved copy that I use for highlighting, annotating, taking notes in, and just loving in general. Without further ado, let's get into the tips, and at the end we have some journal prompts, and I will get to why those are important later, but make sure you stick to the end to find out what those are. Number 1 is to use a family tree. This might seem odd, or it might make you think that any book I have to have a family tree to understand is just too much work. But I encourage you to use a family tree if the book starts to feel a bit too confusing. But a lot of complaints of first-time readers are that the book is very confusing, characters have somewhat similar names, and it's generally sometimes difficult, especially on your first read through, to know who is who all the time. So you can just take that out of the equation and use a family tree that you can find online. Now, be aware that this family tree will contain spoilers. I think it's not a big deal as long as you just, stick to referring to the family tree only when you're like getting confused about who is who, and no need to inspect further on down the family tree and try to speculate about what's going to happen. It's specifically difficult because there are a number of characters whose name begin with H, and those ones are the ones that I think people have the most trouble with getting sorted. And then once you read this book through, you will have no problem coming back to it and remembering who is who. And I think that's just the beauty of it, that every read of this book really is a unique experience, and there are so many layers to delve into. Now, my second tip goes along with the first one, and it is to make peace with being a little confused. In my opinion, and I've heard others that agree with this, the slight confusion, especially toward the beginning, really lends to the general vibe of the story, of almost looking in through a window on this scene and watching the story take place. And sometimes during the story you might feel yourself desperately wishing that you could go through the window and be a part of those people's lives, but there is this coldness, this harshness, this wild landscape and these wild characters that almost keep outsiders from being able to come in. And I think that that is a really important part of the story. And so I think that that confusion is very intentional, and that if you make peace with it, your reading will be all the more enjoyable. Tip number 3 is to learn a bit about the culture and political issues of the time, namely the slavery and prejudice against certain groups, as well as the women question. I could make a whole video about that, and I could spend forever learning about that myself, but I would just learn whatever's interesting to you. It's not necessary, but I do think it is helpful. You may also want to look into religion and customs, particularly in Yorkshire at the time. And then after you do this, make peace with the story existing within these cultural, political, social boundaries so that you can appreciate it even more on an even deeper level. And then when the story breaks through those boundaries, you can appreciate that all the more, because this is a very different time period, and I think this book is extremely relevant even now, but in my opinion, it helps to have a basic understanding of what was going on at the time, and it just adds so much more meaning and value to a lot of aspects of the narrative. And then going along with this, I'd also recommend learning about Emily Bronte herself. I have a lot of information about her and a lot of awesome resources that I mentioned in my video that is Writing Like Emily Bronte, trying out Emily Bronte's writing routine. So definitely check that out if you haven't seen it already. One more awesome resource I have to give you is Ben over at Hardcore Literature on YouTube. He has some amazing videos about classic literature and how to read classic literature, and he's been really inspiring to me in getting back into classics. He also has an awesome video about annotating and highlighting your books, and he also has a Patreon with a book club, and there's archives of tons of videos of when the book club has read different classic books, but that's also ongoing live, so you can read in real time with them. Number 4 is to highlight, contemplate, reread any lines or passages that are particularly confusing, interesting, or profound to you. And then that leads us right into tip number 5, which is to journal occasionally throughout your reading. In my opinion, great books are a mirror in which we can see depths of ourselves that we otherwise could not have experienced or would have been much more difficult to see. And so I think journaling throughout this process, asking yourself questions about the characters, about the themes, about yourself, about your reactions and feelings to certain things that happen, and just allowing yourself to journal about that is such an amazing way to learn so much more about your own human being. And then if you have a notebook that you keep for journaling during this reading, it's really awesome to look back on it the next time that you read Wuthering Heights and see how your experience changed from when you read it this time to the next, from one time to another. And that process can really allow you to see how much you've grown or changed over the years, which is, in my opinion, the best part of being human, our ability to grow and change and learn. And that's all the tips for today, but I have 5 journal prompts to share with you. I will read them all out to you right now, and I will also type them all out in the description box so that you can refer back to them easily throughout your reading. And these journal prompts do not need to be used only one time. You can use them, mix and match, and use them throughout the reading at different points in the reading. I definitely recommend doing a couple different journaling sessions at different intervals, but whatever feels most natural to you. All right, journal prompt number 1. Which characters do I feel for so far, if any, and why? Which ones do I dislike and why? Number 2, what themes am I noticing so far, and how do I feel about those themes? What are my opinions? Number 3, looking over a line that you highlighted and asking yourself, what do I love about this line? Or if you highlighted it because it was confusing, why was this line confusing to me? And is it still? Number 4, how do I feel about this story being mostly a secondhand account? This will make more sense if you haven't read it once you get started. Do I trust the narrator? Do I always notice that I am being told a story, or are there times when I get lost in the story? When and why? Number 5, do I see Emily Bronte's hand in the story? Do I see Emily Bronte as a person in the story? Where, if so, or why not? That is all I have for you today. I really, really hope that you give this book a read or a reread, and definitely, please, please, please let me know how it goes. Maybe save this video to a playlist or something so you can refer back to it. And also, if you've read Wuthering Heights before, let me know what you thought about it. Did you love it? Did you hate it? It's generally a very polarizing book. People either love it or they hate it. So I'm curious to see what you think. And if maybe after watching this video and you didn't like the book, maybe you want to give it another try. If not, that's okay too. Have a wonderful, beautiful day, my friend. Bye.